So Maggie, we have a podcast, you and I do, called the Deconstruction Zone. But did you know that we are the second most popular podcast by this title?
I did, because I tried to look us up from my personal YouTube account, and it was kind of hard.
Yeah, it is a little hard. And there's a guy, I'm going to forget his name. It starts with the J. It's like Jim or James or John or something like that. I don't think Jim or James. And he runs this channel called the Deconstruction Zone. And right now, we've relaunched this podcast kind of simultaneously with the launch of a sermon series by the same title at The Well. And we've been going through deconstruction and reconstruction. And someone commented on The Well's sermon saying, hey, you know that you're stealing this title and stuff from Jim. And so just for anyone that's listening, and for you, if you didn't know, Maggie, I want you to know that our podcast started 13 months before his podcast started. So maybe he stole it from us. But I got into the back and forth with this person, and they raised an interesting question I want to talk about, which was who gets to talk about deconstruction and reconstruction. And this person's beef, more or less, was, can this really be a podcast called the Deconstruction Zone if myself as a pastor is on it? Because this other guy, I've not watched a ton of his content, but I think he's an ex-Christian, and it's a little bit more combative and just deconstructing and pulling things down without real, and I won't say this because I don't want to be unfair, but like without a purpose maybe of like rebuilding, at least in the same sort of way that I might hold as a value. And so I'd just be interested, like, I don't know how much you think about that, if you ever had, but who gets to claim deconstruction? Is this like simply something for those that are leaving the faith, so to speak, or is it a tool of Christian discipleship or something altogether different? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Wow, I have so many thoughts right away. I would say that at a certain point in time, I probably would have agreed with that commenter in being annoyed that either current pastors or especially like current evangelicals talking about deconstruction. And I will say that annoyance or frustration would have absolutely been coming from a place of hurt. So I'm not going to put that on the person in your comments talking about it, but for me, I would have agreed with them a couple years ago, and that's where it would have been coming from. Go ahead. Did you have something to follow up?
No, okay. Keep going.
I think I remember when I was more, and I may have said this before, I wouldn't have been able to do this podcast with you probably like 4 years ago. I think I would have been I was still like so angry and so hurt. And I don't think there's anything wrong with anger. I don't think there's anything wrong with being hurt, but like I personally needed to go through a healing process with deconstruction to get to the point where I'm able to talk about it without being emotionally flooded, like pretty much every time. So that's kind of where I'm coming from viewing this. And I remember a few years ago listening to a podcast with, now I'm totally blanking on his name, the guy who wrote I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
I can't remember his name either, but I know who you're talking
about. It's like Joshua Harris.
Yeah.
He wrote this book that got so popular in like purity culture circles and evangelical circles. And I would argue directly caused some lasting harm that people are still dealing with. Like I'm still dealing with the harms of purity culture, and I didn't even read his book. So, but I know that a lot of people's upbringing was really informed by that. And a couple years ago, he himself started to deconstruct and was kind of doing like the podcast circuit and talking about his own deconstruction. And I think he was selling something, maybe like selling like a class or a course or a pamphlet about deconstruction. And that did make me mad. I was like, no, you don't get to, I think it was more the like profiting off of it that was problematic in my view. But I'm certainly glad that he deconstructed some of the harmful beliefs, because I'm sure that they were hurting him too. But yeah, the fact that he, as kind of one of the figureheads of this thing that so many people were trying to heal from suddenly stood up and was like, oh, I also am deconstructing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where I sympathize with this person a little bit. Like, it can feel like a rebrand, right? Like, you have him, you have Carl Lentz, you have these other people that have had big failures, and now they're talking about the benefits of grace and redemption and the path of deconstruction, and jumping a little bit more into this. I know there's a Christian rapper named Lecrae who I enjoy, but I like distance myself from his content because he was like more conservative than I was, and I was like, he has some problematic beliefs, and I've gotten a little bit closer to it because he's a little bit in this like place of, I think, curious deconstruction. But I say all that to say this: like, I actually, like, I fully understand why would people see me on this podcast. Like, I haven't rebranded because I feel like this is who I've been, but I get the fear of what's happening. And even when this podcast began 13 months before another one under our name began, and several years ago.
Before they stole our name. No,
before they stole our name. That's what was like when I started this podcast, and we were looking at Emily's story and kind of the first chapter of this journey. Like, she was offered 2 opportunities to walk through deconstruction. One with me, which was like more curious, and we were just like, let's just record it. And this other guy was like, hey, I want to do a podcast with you as well, but I want to like walk you back towards kind of reformed Christianity. And I think that's where I think people would not trust me. And I think rightfully so, because I represent a group of people that have not proven to be very genuine in their care or handling or respect for what deconstruction actually is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that my assessment of the situation is that you have hit the nail on the head with that. I think you might be reminding a lot of people that have hurt them in the past just because of your job and some of your like identity. Like, you've a couple episodes ago, you talked about how you were a straight white male and your identity has never been questioned in the church. And that's very true. And so, a lot of people, especially pastors, if you're deconstructing and kind of the like inciting incident for that was something that a pastor said or a series of things that a pastor said or did, then I could see why it would strike you as problematic that a pastor is running a podcast about deconstruction. That makes sense.
Yeah. So here's what I want to know, because there's a lot of pastors that hop up into the space and like, I'm going to tell you how we should engage in this space and how we should go about this. And I wonder, like, from your perspective, how do you think pastors should engage in the world of deconstruction? Because I feel like it'd be like, let's ask Danny how we should advocate for women's rights or for queer rights. It's like, certainly I want to be an ally for those things, but I should be asking others how I can be an ally and how I can advocate. And oftentimes, is like the straight white man pastor, we're like, well, I'm going to tell you how you should handle deconstruction. But I wonder from your perspective, if you could give me words of wisdom on like from where you have been and where you are and maybe where you hope to be. And for anyone that has no idea what that looks like, what are your encouragements or words of wisdom, guidelines, and guardrails for us pastors in this space, engaging in the conversation of deconstruction?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think real fast, one of my other thoughts about kind of that comment interaction that we started with was, I think that a lot of people have this tendency, especially if they're deconstructing from a high control version of Christianity, a very like fundamentalist, is to kind of morph into this fundamentalist progressive when they're going through their deconstruction phase. So that, what made me think of that is, like, you as a pastor are still allowed to be deconstructing and be a Christian and be a pastor. Like, that's okay. Like, that's a good, I think that's a very healthy way to pastor personally. And so to have someone say, you can't be a part of this space because you don't check the boxes, is kind of doing what, and there's levels to this, but it's kind of doing what a lot of fundamentalist spaces would also do. And so I think my advice to anybody, but especially to pastors who hold kind of social capital and like a position of social power, would be to definitely keep that in mind. Like if you are wanting to talk more about deconstruction, be a person that is kind of leading people through it, maybe be wary of the like progressive fundamentalism that can come with it. So I think something inherent to deconstruction is kind of a diversity of thought.
Yeah.
And if someone is going through deconstruction and winds up back at like Reformed Christianity, or winds up in a place that's a little more conservative, it's not necessarily that they did deconstruction wrong. That may just be what it looks like for them.
Yeah. You're in an interesting place, like in your journey, because like you seem like very, at least from my perception, like you're very self-confident, you're very self-aware, you're very curious, and I don't see any of those things at odds. Like I think you hold a set of beliefs that you're willing to question, and some things you've like brought back up, maybe where they once were, and other things you're like, this is not helpful for me anymore. But have you always been in that space? Like, did you have any like real tough seasons where it's like you walked into churches and it's like you burst into tears, or like you walked into a place and it was just like, this isn't for me, or maybe times you never thought you'd walk into a church again? Like I've only known Maggie as like this very, and I think you said this to me, like you came in and you're like, I essentially have nothing to lose, and like if this if this thing sucks, I just don't have to come back, which I appreciate. And you can share more of that. I think you've shared that at least once here. But what has the journey been like, and have you had any like more hard seasons in your deconstruction?
Absolutely, I have. Yes. And for me, deconstruction and mental health go hand in hand. So I can't like talk about my experience with this without talking about mental illness and mental health. So that's just like not really a trigger warning. Well, maybe, but if you're not in a place to hear that, skip ahead. I will say it makes me really happy to hear you say that I come off as really self-confident, because that is an area that I've grown in hugely. And that's largely in part, like, thanks to medication. Like I am medicated for anxiety, and boy, does it work, because if I'm not on it, then it's like, I am just a nervous wreck. Can't get anything done. I'm not confident in a single thing I've ever done or said. But yeah, so being in a place that's more mentally stable and medicated allows me to be myself in a way that I'm really, really grateful for. So there's that piece of it. But yes, I absolutely, when I first started deconstructing, it happened really quickly. I just got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore, and it being Calvinism. I couldn't take the cognitive dissonance. I couldn't take the mental gymnastics, and I couldn't take the doctrine of like total human depravity. I just hated myself, and I thought that everybody else hated me too, including Jesus and God. I thought that they found me disgusting and abhorrent, and I don't know. And the language that I was receiving about God sounded very abusive, sounded very like, you're so lucky that it's because I love you so much that I'm even doing this. Like, you don't actually deserve it, but it's because of me, like my grace and my power. And that is, if a person is saying that to you, that's toxic. Like, that is abusive language. So to have that coming from God was really, really damaging. So yeah, for a really long time, I couldn't sit through an evangelical service without like crying. I couldn't engage with, I couldn't listen to like contemporary worship music until I started going to the well again. And even actually for the first maybe month or so, worship was kind of hard for me, of just like, this is like, I don't know. I felt simultaneously like disingenuous of like, oh, I'm singing these words, but I don't really believe them. And also like, oh, there's that spooky evangelical Calvinist language creeping back in. But I eventually kind of got to a place where I felt peaceful about it, and now it's not a problem. But yeah, I absolutely have, I think, just healed and changed a lot, but it hasn't always been easy. It's been really emotionally taxing.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. So this past Sunday, I was at the well, and there was a person there who was joining us for the first time, but I know a little bit of their story, and very knowledgeable, very smart, very religious, or very spiritual, but has like some beef with like evangelical church. And it was interesting for me because I came face to face with this thing. And this happens when like new people show up, especially new ones that I know a little bit of their story. And I just watch how they engage, but not in a judgmental way. But I'm like, by many of the trappings of our church, like we look like the problem. Like we sang songs that, depending on the sermon to follow, could be backed up or substantiated in really negative ways or really positive ways. And I was watching, we were singing a song, I think it was Reckless Love maybe, and I was watching the person, like they would only sing like every third or fourth word, and not even word, like they would only sing certain sentences that like were not problematic. And I just was kind of watching them in that rhythm. And then if you remember, I think you were at that service. I even made a comment about like how God's love isn't reckless. Like like that came up to me like just in the moment, because like I think I appreciate what that song is trying to do, but I also know that it perpetuates some things. And so that's a long way of getting to. I know that our church can be confusing in some ways because it feels evangelical in all of the most triggering ways, but also in all of the best of ways. And at least from my perspective, like trying to like rewrite that. And so what has that journey been like for you? Because like you walk into a place like the well and it feels like everything that you have tried to walk away from in a lot of ways, but then in some ways it's very different. But it's like before you could ever get to the difference, it's like you have to give it a try. And I think that's in some ways what I wonder if that might be the biggest hurdle of a church like this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we did sing Reckless Love yesterday, and I almost didn't sing the lyric, I don't deserve it, in the chorus. The like, I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. I almost like closed my mouth and didn't sing that too. Just
that
because
was part of the part that this person wasn't singing. Yeah. Which I
totally
don't like that either.
Yeah. And I totally empathize with them. And I even and this happens so often during worship, like when lines like that will come up where I'm like, it's not that I think that I'm so perfect and like, how couldn't God love me? I'm amazing. Like, it's not that. It's like I don't need to beat myself down to accept God's love. Like, I think that God loves me because he loves me, and not because I'm, not in spite of who I am, that kind of thing. And so I have to have these mental conversations with myself while I'm worshiping sometimes of like, ultimately, this is just a song written by somebody else to express their experience. And I am taking part in communal worship right now. And that's really beautiful, like singing with my friends, because we all have these shared values and shared, that even just the shared experience of being here right now. So I totally can empathize with that person. I have to reframe worship in my head a lot, but it can be hard. So, and especially since some of the like really awesome songwriters and like really great worship comes from very like evangelical fundamentalist churches like Hillsong, and like, it's so that can be really tough. But what was the question? Sorry, I started.
Well, no, I think you're moving down the track. I guess the question was like, and I guess for you, you came in, and was it hard for you to stick around, like, because so many of the things felt so familiar? That's more or less the question of like,
okay, yeah.
Because I think in many ways we present like a evangelical church, and I mean that in really positive ways, actually, but I also know that represents in really negative ways as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I have said this before, and obviously it took me a while to get to this space, but just to affirm anybody who feels like stepping into a church they would maybe light on fire or cry, but they want to and they're scared. Like, your pastor's not in charge of you. Like I did go in and I was like, Danny and JT, I knew who you guys were because I followed the well on Instagram. So I was like, Danny and JT are not in charge of me. I don't owe them anything. Like I can go and enjoy it. And if I don't enjoy it, I can leave. And like, that is true. Like if you go to church and you are not getting fulfillment out of it, like you don't have to stay. You can leave. And your pastor is not going to take your birthday away. Like they're not in charge of you. I don't know, like it just, having that mindset going in was so freeing. But yeah, I think I also had this really weird mix of emotions visiting the well because I grew up a Christian. I was a Christian always until like 2020. And so I was so used to church that it was so comfortable. And like going to the well, I knew enough about it to know that it was theologically diverse and that I could be there and be welcomed there, even if I didn't agree 100% with you or agree 100% with JT or whatever. But you guys, the first first service I went to, you guys were doing that like rock'em sock'em thing before the sermon. And JT was like, oh, I know this might seem kind of weird to you. And I was like, no, it doesn't, because I've gone to church forever. Like it felt almost comfortable in a way of like, I know what to expect from this. And so, yeah, that was kind of a weird mix of feelings of like, I'm scared of this, but I'm also comforted by it. Just because it's so familiar. And I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, it certainly does. And I'm going to like fight against myself here and be the devil's advocate. Like, cause I think that's the fear of people in the deconstruction space, right? Is that like, there's this like, and I'm going to talk about me as pastors, but like we are the familiar commodity in the churches. And so we feel comfortable, and like, it's almost like the gaslighting abusive partner that's trying to like draw you back in with what is comfortable to like get you in to like then abuse you again. And like, I don't think it's certainly not my intention and what we have ever made a practice or done at the well. But if I'm putting myself in the shoes of the person, like, and when you're describing like a God that hates us and all that, like it's a lot of like spiritual gaslighting that's going on of like, you're not good enough and you'll never be good enough. And it's like, I mean, we've watched that movie before, right? Where like the abusive partner is just beating down their significant other to the point where it's like, you're nothing without me. And then they're just a shell of themselves. Right. And then in a horror movie, they go away and then they get sucked back into it. Right. And then in a happy movie, they break free and they find something different. But there's very few where it's like the source of trauma and gaslighting they break away from and then come back to, and that is like a changed, reformed person. Right. And I think that's a little bit of like the uphill battle, and why from myself, I get frustrated because like, I know my heart and I know where it's at, but I also look around, I'm like, the landscape, I have nothing around me that gives much hope or credit for me actually wanting to do what's right by people. And as pure as my intentions are, there's just been too many people that have been hurt on the other side of it, you know?
Yeah. I think it's, as a person who goes to your church, I'm really glad that you acknowledge that and that you see that. Because I think that there is probably a part of this that's like, people are always going to be kind of afraid of this format because it has hurt them so deeply. And there's not really anything that we can do about that. You know, it gets to a certain point where like, there's some of that that's out of certainly your control as a pastor. And even as like a congregant, it's, if I have, you know, friends that have deconstructed too, and I'm like, oh, I'm going back to church. They're like, great, I'm never going to do that. It's like, all right, that's okay. Like, I can't force you to do this thing that I know is going to be emotionally harmful to you. Like, that's not a good friend move to like force you to go somewhere, you know? And I think something that plays a role in how, like, we're using this like language of abuse, this like gaslighty, like love bomby, almost like things that churches can do. And there's also this forced vulnerability. I am not I think this is like my 8 wing, my Enneagram 8 wing coming out. I'm not a like naturally trusting person. Like I definitely, it takes me a while to feel comfortable being vulnerable with people. And I had some of my friends at church stay late after service yesterday to help me clean up part of the kids area, and asking for help was huge for me. Like I was gonna just do it by myself, and then I'm like, no, that's gonna take forever. Like just ask for help, and if everybody says no, then that's fine because you were gonna do it alone anyway. But if they say yes, then it'll go faster. And it did. A bunch of people said that they would stay with me, which was awesome. So, but yeah, that like, I guess coming from that space of like, I don't like to be vulnerable with people. I like to control what I share. And I don't like to be exposed and like vulnerable. That is really hard. And growing up in the church, there was a lot of forced vulnerability and like manufactured trust of like, when you go to church camp, you are supposed to like share your testimony. And that means like sharing every like hard and difficult and burdensome emotion you've ever had with people you barely know, and talking about like really spiritual, really personal, emotional things. And if you don't do that, or if you're at least in my experience, when I would kind of balk at that or like not want to share, it was seen as like not trusting God also. So that, I think I have also like deconstructed and taken the power back for myself of like, so when I started going to the well, I'm like, yeah, these people are not in charge of me. I don't owe them anything. And I also don't owe them vulnerability. Like I don't I mean, if you want to be in relationship with people, vulnerability needs to be a part of that to some extent, but like it can develop naturally over time. You don't have to go to small group on the very first night, 3 weeks after you start going to a new church, and like lay bare your soul to these people that you barely know. You can give it a minute. That's okay. And it doesn't mean you're not trusting them. It doesn't mean you're not trusting God. Certainly. It just means that like, that's how relationships work, is that it takes time. And I think that a way to control people is making them emotionally dependent on each other and on like the leader of a group. So one way that the church kind of does that in an abusive way is by forcing people to be vulnerable really quickly. Yeah,
because I mean, it creates a need to be cared for, but also like cult leader 101 is like, get Maggie to confess her deepest, darkest sin to me, and then I have that as leverage over you. And I don't know that like Young Life camps, and sorry, Young Life catching strays over here, but I don't know that that's like what Young Life camp is trying to do per se. But I think that they're using tactics that have been generally manipulated. And I'm with you. Like it's funny. Like I think about this idea of like, you just don't owe anyone your story, and you don't owe anyone anything. But you're exactly right on the other side, is like vulnerability is the path to like real relationship. And like, I'm an Enneagram 8, and I find myself like, I naturally don't trust. It feels like, and this is not true, I'm like throwing a pity party, but every time I open myself up to someone, they eventually betray me, is like the narrative that I've like told myself. And so I get into this thing, but I find myself, my natural way is to like, I'll drop little pieces of like real authentic vulnerability out to see how people manage it. And it lets me like push to see like, what is this person's threshold for trust? And then I like add more and more and more. Because for me, like, and this is like a personality of my type, but I think this falls for other people, is like, it takes a lot of emotional and spiritual energy for me to get into other people's spaces as the fullest version of myself, because I've been taught over time that like, I'm going to be rejected or betrayed or whatever, which is a great sign for like any non-pastors in the room, like just to know like your pastors fight with the same level of insecurity and fear and all that kind of stuff. And in some ways more depending on the arena, and sometimes less depending on the arena. So it's like, it's very circumstantial, but like I worry about that all the time of like, how much am I letting people in? And sometimes people think I'm like an oversharer in terms of like getting my things out, but really it's like I'm testing the waters to see how trustworthy the people around me are, so that I can like suss out who I'm actually able to rely on and trust. And I think on the flip side, maybe that's what many people are doing in church, is like, who are the people that I can actually trust? But the church has often said like, just give it to us all once you walk through the door. And like, I wouldn't do that at the well. And I know our intentions. Like, I think that's like a bad strategy, because it's giving someone else too much power too fast. And maybe power, like not even too fast. Cause it's like, I don't know that you should ever give that much power away. And I think back to like during COVID in 2020, my in-laws went to a church and their pastor told them they couldn't meet in a small group in their house because of health restrictions. Certainly like there's health guidance and things that maybe reasons they should or shouldn't have done that. But what I also told them is like, your pastor doesn't get to tell you what to do in your personal life. Like, and I think we give like, and again, I think there were health reasons why they probably shouldn't have done that. And I was on the side of, you guys maybe shouldn't do this. But I was also like, it's not because your pastor said no. Like you don't have to give them so much authority over your life. But I think we've been trained to do. I mean, I just watched a TikTok about this right before I got on this call with you. Like someone was like, you can't be a real Christian unless you're covered by someone and they're telling you what to do. And it was using this like super flowery religious language, but it was all a control thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I think what Jesus wanted for us was far more than being controlled by people.
Yeah. I wonder where that comes from, because I do go back and forth. I try to give most pastors and evangelical like leaders a generous read of like, I think that you are not a psychopath who wanted to start this because you wanted followers, like a cult leader. I'm sure there are, just like law of big numbers, there have to be some that like, that's the situation. But I think a lot of people really do believe in their version of God and Jesus, and they are genuinely trying to share that with other people and using some really toxic strategies to go about that. But I think about the story in the Gospels of like when Jesus, and now I can't remember who it was, but Jesus is like, hey, drop everything and leave with me right now. And the disciple does, and it's just like, yeah, you're right, bye. And like leaves everything, doesn't go home to pack, doesn't go home to like, you know, doesn't put in his 2 weeks, doesn't do all of this stuff. And how often that is preached as like this is what we should be doing. Like give up everything right now. Don't think about it. Just release. Like that is so, it's so easy to prey upon people who do that. Because if you make a snap decision and if you give over all of your trust and all of your, if you give over all of your trust quickly without really knowing who you're following, then that leaves you vulnerable to being abused. So I just think about that with like how a lot of evangelical Christianity is just kind of set up for this. So even if people aren't being malicious, it's kind of baked in to the framework of it.
Yeah. And also I think it's like we're not following Danny, and we're not following Carl Lentz, and we're not following pastor. Like we should be following Jesus. And I think that's where like we mix up that story, because that story could certainly be about abandon everything and follow Jesus, but we have turned it into abandon everything and follow like action verb church pastor, right? And like that's not what it is.
Action verb church pastor.
And I think like that's where again because I'm with you to some extent. Like I don't think that most people get into it to be cult leaders. But then I look at like real cults like Nexium and these other ones that are like these weird like corporate sex cults, and they're like they did get into it for that. And so again, rule of numbers or whatever you said, like it's like there are people out there that are, and like I'm watching my news feed And I'm just like, when is it going to stop? Like the number of pastors that are like abusing children or sleeping with their secretaries or like marrying their youth group members and then raising it up as like the providence of God, bringing them together and then like getting mad at people for having sexual sin in their life. And I'm like, but you like waited for this girl to turn 18 and then you married
like
her.
groomed somebody. Like that's gross. Yeah.
So it's like, there's like, I'm with you in the sense that I don't think most people are at it. I know that's not what I'm trying to do. And so I can only speak for me, but it is like, I just look at some people like, I do think that people get into it for like a personality trait thing sometimes. And I think that's what makes it hard. And maybe some of them aren't even malicious about it, but they misread the story, drop everything and follow me to follow Jesus. And like, but I want you to follow me.
Yeah.
And that's where like there are certain pastors. Do you know Philip Anthony Mitchell? You know him, African-American pastor. It's like 2819 church or something like that, or something. It's a church that's like just massively growing. He's an amazing communicator. I disagree with him on a lot of things theologically. He's pretty conservative, but he's a really, really good communicator. But the thing I agree with him the most, John, even though we disagree on probably like women and queer people and that sort of sets of things, he is like not about himself, at least in what he's preaching. He's like very much like, this is about Jesus, and you guys need to like he went to a church conference and he's like, you guys are making an idol of all of these speakers. And I'm like, I dig that. Like he's trying to like, and maybe he's not, but I'm like perceiving he's trying to like tear the system down a little bit and push it back to Jesus. I thought that's what Francis Chan did. And like, I disagree with Francis Chan on a lot of things as well, but I appreciated that he was like, this is about following Jesus and not me. Like I'm the communicator, but like not the way. And so to circle it back to like our whole conversation on deconstruction, I think like, and who gets to claim it or take it. Like, I think that's where it gets sticky is like, if you're here to point people to Jesus and how deconstruction can be a process of discipleship, and it's not like this start line, finish line process, it's really neat and tidy, that's great. But if you're just trying to like rebrand and get more people to your church or into your weird sex cult, then I think then you're missing the mark. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we see this in other arenas all the time with like greenwashing or like queer baiting of like corporations using things that are really personal and important to people and emotional and real as a way to like get money. And that sucks. Like nobody likes that. It feels icky to be pandered to and tricked. Like that's not what anybody wants. And so I think that I wouldn't want to make like a blanket statement and say like, yeah, all pastors are allowed in the deconstruction space. Anybody is, because it's like, well, if you're here to just lure people back in and cause more damage, then no, you're not allowed here actually. But it's really hard to tell sometimes who is in it because they have a genuine curiosity and a genuine humility for what they believe, and who is just in it to like get more followers, you know?
Yeah. And I think we're certainly in that season of human existence right now where like clout and followers matter more than like, certainly like cult leaders always cared about real followers, like in human form, but like, are you, I am really into cults, like the ideas of them, like not the ideas, but like the documentaries on them.
Yeah.
And my favorite one, I've listened to like every piece of literature or every piece of media on it. It's called, I think it's Twin Flames Universe.
I've seen one like docu-series about it, and it was pretty crazy.
Yes, it's wild. And I've listened to podcasts about it. I've listened to all the watched all the documentaries and miniseries on it. It's wild. But I have to say, like, they started in like, they're the first modern day all online cult. And like, that's one of the reasons, like from an anthropological sense, like they're getting a lot of notoriety because they're really the first cult of their kind. And they would be like, we're not a cult. But totally. It is interesting because it's like, it's been like, we need people to follow us. But it's always been about control. And now this is shifted into like, but now I actually don't even need you in a proximity to me. I can like manipulate you over Zoom and give you $8,000 courses and all these things. And like, they're still living the cult leader life. But it is funny because like they are trying to build a compound and like centralize it now, and so like they've like hunkered down on like cult leader land. But it is interesting, like just cults in general, like the psychological stuff behind it, and it's why I think that the whole church business is weird, and I don't mean that in like a capitalistic business. I mean just like the work of it is weird because we're competing with a pretty untrustworthy ecosystem around us, around faith things in general, whether that's like Christianity or otherwise.
Yeah. I read this book a couple summers ago called Cultish, and it's by Amanda Montell. It's really good. It's about the language of cults and like high control groups, because the term cult is kind of slippery, and I think she talks about this in the book too. It like often gets hurled as an insult at something that actually isn't a cult, but it's used to like describe like, and in it, I know you're a big CrossFit guy, but in it, she talked about like how CrossFit can use like the cult like language to get people to join it. Even though I don't think CrossFit is a cult. I think it's an exercise group. But
I think CrossFit and Orange Theory and all of these workout things,
Orange Theory was another one.
They have built, like they've leveraged the marketing of cult mentality to get it going, which it is either I've joined in. So, I mean, I'm a part of it. I'm on the inner circle. So,
well, and the thing, what I was left with after reading the book is that there are like, it's easier to define a cult by not like what it doesn't do, but kind of. So like if you can leave the group and suffer no negative consequences or like no significant, like if you were to just stop going to CrossFit, well, I know you like also coach for them. So you would like,
I don't coach them. JT coaches.
Oh, JT. Okay. Sorry. If you just like were to stop going to CrossFit, you would just like not see some people that you were used to seeing, but they wouldn't like dox you on the internet or like TP your house or like follow your wife to her car or anything. Like it wouldn't be like, you wouldn't be intimidated, and like, it would just be, you're allowed to leave freely. So that's one green flag for it not being a cult. And that also includes like emotional damage too of people, like, you know, when people start to deconstruct and their friends from their old church are like, oh, let's get coffee. And like, you know, that the coffee is just going to be them badgering you for an hour about why you're not going to church anymore.
Has that ever happened to you, by the way?
No, I left church and people, I think because it was like during COVID time. So I kind of was able to like sneak out.
I just like, I've heard so many stories of that, and I'm just like, the audacity to be like, hey, Maggie, let's get coffee, and like to not like just to completely bury the lead, and then we sit down and be like, hey, I want to talk about your eternal salvation. Like that's wild to me.
It does take some nerve. I've only had conversations like that with people who I'm very personally close to. So it's not like, oh, a girl that I kind of knew, we were in the same small group, and she's like, I'm worried about you. Like that hasn't happened to me, but people that I'm really close with, we certainly have had conversations where they're like, I'm afraid for your eternal soul. And I'm like, okay, well, I really appreciate that. But yeah. And then like other cult like language is things that they break you down so that they can build you up. And I think that this is one thing that we see a lot in Christianity that the well does not do, is that I've not felt beaten down or broken down by the well. Like none of the teachings at this church have like made me feel worse about who I am. And that is a green flag in my mind for this is probably not a cult. And I think that if I were to just leave, no one would like, dox me or TP my house or whatever. So
certainly be sad, but no one would dox you. Well, I will tell you that I laughed when you said that people throw around the term cult in a negative way. I was like, oh, do they? Because that only happens to me every day. I get told that we're a cult every day. But that is interesting. Like, so here's maybe not my last question, but I do have a question for you, because I'm with you. Like churches just tear people down to build them back up. I think that's maybe the most used tool in the evangelical toolbox, but certainly like number one in the cult toolbox, right? Like strip away self-confidence and identity and then rebuild one. So that's negative. But like, I am also someone, like a lot of people would say, like really progressive Christians, like don't believe sin exists. I believe sin and brokenness exist. And so this is a little bit of a tangent, but it fits under the same umbrella. Like, how do you currently, and this could change in 10 episodes, maybe we could revisit it, or maybe it'll say the same, but how do you view the world we live in with brokenness and sin, but not from a way that is meant to like shame or tear you down?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest things that I've had to deconstruct over the time. And that is like, I don't believe in sin in the way that I used to. And I think that calling anything bad that a person does sinful is a gross oversimplification of like the human experience. Okay. So I don't have a great definition for sin. And honestly, I try to avoid using the word in general just because it's something that for me stopped being super duper useful a while ago. Because I think when most people think of sin, then there is this need to ascribe fault. And sometimes when bad things happen, it just happens and it's not necessarily anyone's fault. So it's, maybe both parties carry some blame or everyone. And I feel like when we, at least in my experience, when I talk about sin, it is always like way oversimplified. So I try to avoid using the word, but that doesn't mean that I don't think that humans are capable of harming each other and that damage doesn't happen. Because it certainly does. But things that are like just features of being a human, like getting angry when somebody wrongs you, that anger I wouldn't call sinful. Like even things that are kind of like natural, like bents of humans, like to be selfish or to be greedy or to be jealous. Jealousy is another big one. Like I wouldn't necessarily call those sin, but they absolutely can do damage and they absolutely can harm people. But yeah, it's been really helpful just for me personally. It's been really helpful to take those emotions when I feel them and not like self-flagellate about it and be like, wow, it's because I'm so broken and sinful. It's just like, I'm human. I'm experiencing a human emotion. But if I'm jealous of my friend, I need to work out this jealousy and get past it so that I don't hurt my friend, so that I don't cause harm, and so that I don't hurt myself too, because those feelings can corrupt us as well. So that's just kind of how I handle like the concept of sin at this point. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what to do about the problem of evil and why we live in a dark world. And every day it seems to be growing darker. I don't really know how to address that or to conceptualize it, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly like from my vantage point, it's like, I think that's what the hope of the gospel story is, right? It's like that though we live in a dark world, like both the Christmas story of like light coming into the darkness and then the Easter story of death not getting the final word or sin not getting the final word. I think like that's, the hope of the 52 weeks of the year. It shouldn't just be on 2 weekends a year that we talk about those things. Like that's the whole hope of the story. But I do think it's interesting, like what sin is. And like my definition is always like what tears us apart from God and from our neighbor, or God and one another. And I think that for me has helped not be reductive with it. Like it's not just like what is like one of the 7 deadly sins, or what is like some like the sins of omission or the sins of commission, meaning like the sins I did by something I did, or the things that happened because of my negligence and like just sitting back, and or sins in my heart and sins in my hands, like, so all those sorts of things, like the idea of like what is like tangibly tearing me further away from God and for my neighbors helped me create like a more healthy rubric that is like less about shame and guilt and more about like what is helping me live again, and I think I've said this on a different episode on this one, but like I think the offering Jesus has for us is abundant life at the fullest. And like that is what I think whatever we classify sin as is it's like chipping away at the abundance. But the chipping away doesn't mean it's gone forever. Like I think that it always has the opportunity to be there in full. And I think that's where it's like if we can reject whatever version of sin that is like diminishing the abundance, then I think we've done the right thing. So, but we should do a whole episode on sin. That might be an interesting conversation for us.
That would be I would love to talk about that actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. It's like, it's just such with such a reductive topic in the way that we usually look at it, but it's like so vast. It's crazy. Have you seen the movie Seven?
No.
Oh, it's brutal. It's like one of the worst movies it's like one of the best movies. It's really good. But it has one of the least satisfying, most brutal endings of any movie I've seen. Okay. It's got Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman.
In it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and now canceled Kevin Spacey. But it's about the 7 deadly sins and like a serial killer that kills people by way of those. And it's wild. Yeah. It's an interesting look at the human condition and sin and all that. So, but it's like a really dark movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just like kind of at the point where I don't like to recreationally engage with darkness. I've gotten to the point where like if I have like free time and I want to watch something entertaining, it's probably going to be a comedy or like makeup tutorials or like baking I'm like I want to learn how to create something or laugh, not think about how horrible the world is because I already think about that enough.
Well, I think that definitely fits into the rubric of tearing us apart from God and another. Like, what are we filling ourselves up with? Amy also makes fun of me all the time. She calls me a sensitive soul because I am very similar. Like, I pretty much only watch comedies because I'm like, it takes me a lot of emotional energy to engage in more serious or dark things. And like, I find myself exhausted emotionally, physically, and spiritually after I watch things like that. Like, and there are certain things I can't watch because they're too like emotionally triggering for me based on personal experience. And so certain thematic things, like if we turn it on and it's in the first 30 minutes, I'm like, sorry, Annie, I can't watch this. Like I just gotta turn it off. Yeah. That's so interesting. We'll have to talk about sin soon.
I agree.
Well, do you have a final word for us? Maybe, I don't know, any encouragement for either our people wondering who gets to engage in deconstruction, our pastors or our lay people?
Yeah. I think a really important part of deconstruction is humility. Like you have to acknowledge that you might be wrong or that you probably are wrong to deconstruct your dearly held beliefs. And so I think that should probably extend to like, if you are a person, and I think Danny, you've done a really good job of this, at least of being very vocal and upfront about it, of saying like, yes, you are in this deconstruction space, like you started a podcast, but it wasn't really to gain clout. It was to help a friend through deconstruction as a pastor. But like still realizing that even though your intention wasn't to, be an interloper in this space or whatever, that it might come across that way. And so I think that being aware of optics and having humility in that is really important. So that would be kind of my 2 cents on that.
I love that's a great encouragement. Well, you said this earlier. Pastors can't tell us what to do, so I can't end this podcast. So you have to say it.
All right, the podcast is over.